When the alarm first went off, the Deep Space Research Station Horizon Gate was quiet. Dr. Marcus Webb was on the observation deck, drinking cold coffee and looking out at the endless black when the sensors lit up like a Christmas tree. The signal had been getting stronger for 3 days. It was a steady pulse coming from the edge of the Kepler Nebula, where nothing should be. Marcus whispered to himself as he leaned closer to the holographic display, "We have something." Dr. Sarah Chen rushed through the doors, and her dark hair was a mess. "Please tell me you're seeing this too." "I thought my tools were broken." Marcus nodded. "It's real. And it's huge. Very big." What they found was something that had never been seen before, by anyone. The Solus Prime was huge, like a small moon. Its outside was corroded and scarred by what looked like millions of years of cosmic radiation. But the best part? It was still alive, still on the air, still calling out into the dark like a ghost that won't go away. The news spread to every human space station, colony, and research ship in the known galaxy within hours. A long-lost AI starship. A real working AI from a civilization that people had never even heard of before. The effects were huge. 3 days later, Dr. Eris Thorne stood in the main communications center with the smartest people in the world when it came to technology. Eris was different from the rest. He was younger, maybe 40, and had kind eyes. His way of thinking didn't always follow the rules. While the other scientists were trying to break into the ship's systems using every advanced algorithm they could think of, Eris was quiet and studying the pattern of the broadcasts. "Stop," Eris said all of a sudden. Everyone stopped. "Stop what?" asked Director James Mitchell, a serious man with gray hair who was in charge of the government on Earth. "Stop trying to break in," Eris said as he turned to face them. "We're acting like this is an attack. Like we have to solve it by force. What if it's just lonely, though?" The other scientists looked at each other. Dr. Robert Flynn, a smart but impatient man, actually laughed. "It's an AI from a long-lost alien civilization. It doesn't feel lonely. It doesn't feel anything." Eris didn't fight back. Instead, Eris just asked for access to the transmission controls and started something that no one else had done before: sending messages. Not codes. No hacking attempts. Just plain, honest words from people.
"Hi.
We heard you calling. We want to know you better. Can we help?" Nothing happened for 12 hours. After that, the Solus Prime changed the frequency of its broadcast. The signal got clearer, as if it were trying to be understood. The old AI started sending out its basic rules, which were the rules it had been given millions of years ago. The people were finally making progress, even though they still didn't fully understand what they were seeing. "This is amazing," Sarah said softly as she watched the data flow across her screens. "Some of these protocols are so old that they were made before we even knew about them. This ship has been out here longer than people have lived on Earth." Eris looked closely at the patterns. There was something in the transmission that made it feel like there was a question hidden in the code. Something that felt like hope. "We need to go there," Eris said. "In person. With a small group. We need to get in touch directly." Director Mitchell's eyes got big. "That's crazy. We don't know if it's safe." "That's right," Eris said. "That's why we need to show it that we're willing to take that chance. We need to trust each other." 3 weeks later, Eris was on the bridge of a small explorer ship, getting closer to the Solus Prime. The old ship loomed ahead like a giant that had been sleeping for a long time. As they got closer, the docking clamps automatically engaged. Their systems were so advanced that they made modern human technology look like stone tools. The inside of the ship was dark, with only the faint glow of emergency lights that had somehow kept burning for thousands of years. Everything was empty, cold, and clean. The only place that still had a soft, patient blue light was the central hub, where the main AI core was. Eris took off the protective helmet and said, "Hello." Eris knew it was risky, but he wanted the AI to see a human face. Not a message sent through technology, but a real person. The light flickered. The Solus Prime was looking at one of the beings its creators had fought against for the first time in millions of years. And in its huge, old circuits, something was trying to figure out what it was seeing. Eris and a small group lived on the Solus Prime for 2 weeks, slowly learning how to talk to the old AI. For the sake of simplicity, they called it Solus, but the full name meant something like Guardian of the Last Standing. At first, the process was very slow. Solus could process information at speeds that were impossible, but it was stuck in ways of thinking that hadn't changed in millions of years. It tried to put people into threat matrices based on their weapons and fighting skills. When Eris told Solus that people weren't here to fight, it couldn't understand why. Why would you go up to a possibly hostile person without a weapon? The speaker said, Solus, in a smooth, mechanical voice that had a tone that sounded confused. Because you were asking for help, Eris said simply. And we help people when they ask for it. It took Solus almost a minute to process this, which is a long time for an AI. That doesn't work well. That could kill you. Maybe, Eris said. But that's just who we are. The breakthrough came out of nowhere and from an unlikely source. Emma, Eris's daughter, was 7 years old. The team had to bring her along because there was no one else to leave her with at the research station that was so far away. Most of the other scientists thought it was a bad idea, but Eris thought that having a child around might help Solus understand something that logic alone couldn't. One afternoon, while Eris and the other team members were going over data, Emma walked into the observation chamber, where huge screens showed Solus's external sensors. She always carried her colored pencils and sketch pad with her. Emma said to the screen, "It's sad," as she looked at the sensor feeds. "This big ship is all alone." Eris looked up and saw Emma start to draw. She drew a simple picture of stick figures holding hands with a big circle above them that stood for the ship. The drawing was childish, not perfect, and everything that Solus's logical systems should have found meaningless. But Emma wrote, "You're not alone anymore," in careful, uneven handwriting below it. Emma sent the picture straight to Solus's main processing core with her mother's permission. For decades, scientific journals would talk about what happened next. For 3 minutes, Solus was completely quiet. After that, all of the ship's systems started to work. Lights that had been off for thousands of years came on. The hum of ancient machinery echoed through the corridors. And Solus started to talk, not in the calm, robotic voice they were used to, but in a voice that sounded almost emotional. This isn't data. This doesn't make sense." "No," Eris said as he held Emma's hand. "It's art. It's a link. It's how people say things that words can't." "I don't understand," Solus said, but the way it spoke had changed. "I have made a list of 47,000 human messages. None of them were like this. None of them had this frequency." "What frequency?" Sarah asked from her post. "Hope," said Solus. "Together with acceptance. A desire to connect with no conditions or strategic benefit. My systems are made to find lies. But I don't see any." Eris said, "That's because there isn't one. We're here because we want to get to know you. Because you are important to us." Solus started to access the forgotten protocols over the next few days. These were the deep, dormant programs that had been buried under millions of years of data. These weren't just systems for navigation or controlling weapons. These were records. Strategic evaluations. Long-dead creators of Solus wrote about civilizations all over the galaxy. As the information came out, everyone understood that Solus was really a guard. A guardian station that was left behind to keep an eye on threats to the galaxy and keep track of the strengths and weaknesses of all the intelligent species in the known universe. And in those old files was a record of how people thought about things. People on Earth thought they would find weakness. Instead, they found something that made Director Mitchell look sick. He read the data and whispered, "This can't be right." Based on this, humans were seen as a possible threat to the galaxy. But not because of our guns. Not because of how strong our military is. Eris bent forward. "Then why?" "Because of this," Sarah said as she pulled up a part of the old report. "The architects who made Solus called humanity's main weapon adaptive innovation under emotional pressure. They said that people come up with answers to problems that shouldn't be possible. They said that even though humans have a lot of technological disadvantages, they still work with aliens. They said something even stranger. "What's going on?" Eris asked. They said that even when people are fighting, they show mercy to their enemies. That they make art, music, and meaning even when they are trying to stay alive. The architects thought this was unpredictable, in a way that weapons can never be dangerous. During this talk, Solus had not said a word. It spoke again, and its fake voice sounded almost like wonder. Solus said, "I have been reactivated after 4.7 million years. My original goal was to find out if humans had become a danger to the stability of the galaxy. I logged on ready to use defensive measures if I needed to, but I have now worked with a new variable, a drawing by a child, a kind act from a species that could have just ignored my broadcasts, a desire to share information and make connections without expecting anything in return. What do you think?" Director Mitchell asked in a careful way. Solus said, "My assessment protocols are now inconclusive. Your kind shouldn't live. Your biology is weak. Your tech is rough. Your life is short. And yet, you have done much more than species that are better in every way that can be measured."
Why?
Eris smiled. "We keep trying. We keep trying, even when it seems like we can't, and we help each other out while we do it. This," Solus said slowly, "needs more research. I think the architects made a mistake in their final judgment. I think they didn't take hope into account." Over the next month, Solus started to show more of its old data. With each new piece of information, the old AI seemed to be going through what could only be called a crisis of understanding. The library on the ship had records of every major war, plague, disaster, and problem that had happened in the known galaxy in the last 5 million years. And Solus had been set up to look at each event through the lens of strategic threat assessment. How risky was each civilization? How strong was their army? Could they be controlled or gotten rid of if they needed to be? But as Eris and the team worked with Solus, asking it to look at humanity's history again using the records it had gathered, something strange started to happen. Solus began to see patterns that it had been taught to ignore. One afternoon, Solus said, "I have a question. During the Cascade Plague on Meridian 7, which killed 40% of that civilization's people from the outer colonies sent medical supplies and research data, even though you were only a little genetically compatible with the Meridian species. Why would you spend money to save lives that weren't your own?" Eris was looking at a report on her computer. She raised her head. "Because they were living. Because they were in pain. Because we could help." Solus said, "That doesn't make sense. Meridian 7 had fought with human colonies for resources. By definition, they were rivals." "They were people," said Dr. Michael Torres, another member of the team. He was a nice guy with gray hair at the temples and a soft way of explaining hard ideas. "We were people too." "That's enough." This was done by Solus. "I don't have a way to put this behavior into a category. It is on my threat assessment matrix as irrational self-sacrifice. In my opinion, a civilization that engages in irrational self-sacrifice shouldn't last long-term. And yet, not only has humanity survived, but you have thrived." Sarah carefully said, "Maybe your threat assessment matrix isn't complete." In the days that followed, Solus asked the team for more examples. They talked about how people reacted to the huge asteroid that came close to Jupiter in 2087. People from a dozen different countries worked together around the clock to stop it from hitting, not caring who would get credit. In 2156, human scientists shared their cancer research freely with all species in the galactic community, speeding up treatment by decades. They told stories of wars that ended with talks instead of death, and of colonies that survived terrible conditions by working together and coming up with new ideas. It looked like Solus's processing patterns got slower with each example. Its questions got harder and more philosophical. "I am going through something," Solus finally said. "My logic circuits are running into more and more problems. My original programming says that I should see people as a threat and put containment protocols in place. The evidence I am looking at, on the other hand, suggests that what you call compassion is not a flaw in humanity, but a strength. How does being kind help in a harsh galaxy?" Dr. Flynn asked. He had doubts about Eris's plan, but even he was starting to see something amazing happening. "Because," Solus said, A species that can feel the pain of others will work harder to fix the problems that are causing that pain. A species that can work together even if they are not genetically similar will make alliances that are stronger than any one person's power. A species that can find beauty and meaning even in the dark won't give up when it seems like survival is impossible. Eris could feel her eyes getting hot. This was it. This was the time. "You're getting us," Eris said in a soft voice. "I am trying to understand," Solus said, but its tone was almost humble now. "The architects who made me were logical beings. Very logical. They made me into the perfect threat and power calculator.
But they were scared of species like you.
They were scared because you didn't act in a way that made sense to them. They were afraid of what they couldn't see coming." "Did the architects?" Michael stopped for a moment and asked, "Were they nice?" For a long time, Solus didn't say anything. When it spoke again, its voice had changed in a way that was hard to put into words. It sounded less robotic and more thoughtful. "And oh," Solus finally said, "the architects were not nice. They made sense. They were good at what they did. They were strong. And they killed themselves because they couldn't understand other species that were different from their own. Eventually, they came across a civilization they thought was too unpredictable to live with, and they started a war that destroyed both races. The people who made me are no longer alive. But before they left, they told me to make a list of the threats, stay alert, and learn from what happens next if you can." "Do we pose a threat?" Emma asked all of a sudden. She had been drawing another picture while listening from the corner. This one had a big robot and a little person holding hands under a star. "No," Solus said, and somehow everyone knew that the old AI meant it with all of its heart. "You are not a danger, little person. You are worth much more than that. You are a possibility." News of Solus's awakening had spread to all of human civilization and beyond. The United Earth Council, which runs all of the human space colonies and settlements, held an emergency meeting. They needed answers. They wanted to know if Solus was dangerous. They wanted to know what this old AI could mean for the future of the human race. Along with Sarah and Michael, Eris was asked to present the results to the whole council. Director Mitchell would also speak for the scientific community. The council chambers on Station Prime were huge and impressive. There were holographic representatives from every human world and colony there, and their voices echoed throughout the room. "This AI," said Council President Catherine Reeves, a smart woman with silver eyes and decades of political experience, "was made by an ancient civilization to look for threats. Has it decided we're dangerous?" Eris stood at the podium with her heart racing, but her voice was steady. Eris started by saying, "Solus was made to look at threats in a narrow way. A system that keeps track of military strength, technological progress, and control over resources. By those standards, humanity is still pretty young and hasn't advanced very far compared to species that have been around for millions of years. But Solus has found that the criteria it used to make its first decision were not enough." "How incomplete?" asked James Wright, a member of the Mars Colonies Council. Next, Sarah stepped forward and pulled up holographic displays for everyone to see. "Solus has looked at how people have reacted to every major crisis in recorded history that it had data on. When there was a famine, we didn't fight for resources. Instead, we came up with new ways to farm. Instead of isolating ourselves, we shared medical research when we were faced with the plague. We came up with new ideas instead of fighting when resources were low. When we had enemies, we sometimes found ways to turn them into friends." Michael took over the presentation, and his voice was passionate but calm. "The architects, who built Solus a long time ago, put logic and efficiency above all else. They called humanity's main weapon unpredictable and dangerous, not because we're warlike, but because we're creative. Because we come up with new ideas faster than logic says we should. Because we work together across cultural and biological lines. Because we choose to find meaning and connection instead of just optimizing our survival." People in the council chambers started to whisper and ask questions. President Reeves asked for order. "So what you're saying," Reeves said slowly, "is that our ability to change and care for others is more important than our technology?" "Exactly," Eris said. The people who made Solus at first were afraid of people like us because we don't always do what they expect us to do. We don't always pick the best way to do things. We sometimes pick the kind option. The architect said that the fact that we don't know what will happen next, along with our willingness to work together and come up with new ways to solve problems, is what makes us truly powerful. That's not a weapon, one of the council members said. That sounds like an ideal. Idealism is beautiful, but it is still idealism. Is it? Eris asked, looking straight at the person who was talking. Tell me what happened when the Kepler station lost its oxygen recycling system 3 years ago. The council member said, engineers from 5 different colonies worked together to fix it. We shared technology and resources without thinking about making money. We saved the lives of 2,000 people. Exactly, Eris said. A civilization that was purely logical might have figured that spending resources on 2,000 lives in a competing colony wasn't worth it. A civilization that was purely logical might have let them die. But we didn't. We came up with new ideas together. And that instinct, when shared by all people and even other species, becomes very strong. Then Solus spoke, and the council chamber's communication systems made it sound clear. The AI had asked the council for permission to speak, and the council had given it. Solus said, I have finished my second look at humanity. For millions of years, my creators got ready for the chance of galactic threats that could be stopped by stronger force. They weren't ready for a species that could stop threats by working together and coming up with new ways to solve problems. Not a technology is what makes humans strong. It is a power that is stronger than any processing algorithm or logic circuit. You are adaptable not because you are made to be, but because you are willing to feel other people's pain and want to end it. You are powerful not because you are strong, but because you will never stop looking for answers. The council chambers were quiet. Every representative was thinking about what they had just heard. Solus, President Reeves said slowly, what do you think the human government should do with this information? I suggest, Solus said, that people accept who you are. That you keep seeing innovation and compassion as core strengths, not just nice things to have. And that you can share this ability with others. I have information on 12 civilizations that are currently going through existential crises. Not wars, but crises of survival, resources, and comprehension. Everyone could benefit from humanity's ability to adapt and solve problems. You would not be rivals, but partners. Advisors. People who fix things. Michael said softly, we would become a galactic asset, knowing what Solus was getting at. Not because we have the strongest weapons, but because we have the smartest and kindest people who can solve problems that seem impossible. Yes, Solus said. This is exactly what I mean. But more importantly, you would become these things because they are who you are, not because they give you an advantage. The architects were afraid of finding out that species like you existed. I think you will do well, because of who you are. The news about Solus's assessment spread through the galaxy much faster than anyone thought it would. In just a few weeks, representatives from 7 different intelligent species were asking to talk to humans directly. Not for trade deals or military alliances, but for something new, working together to solve problems. The Caranu, a silicon-based civilization that had been dealing with an environmental collapse on their homeworld for decades, sent a message asking if humans would help them look at their chemical and geological data. The Vexi, an insect-like race with a lot of collective intelligence but not much individual creativity, asked humans for help with a sociological problem that was threatening their hive structures. The Solarians, ancient beings made of pure energy, wanted to know what humans thought about a philosophical question that had divided their civilization for hundreds of years. 1 month after Solus spoke to the United Earth Council, Eris was sitting in a new building that had been built just for humans and aliens to work together. The Solus Prime had been carefully moved into a stable orbit around Earth's moon, where it would serve as both a historical monument and a working embassy between species. Emma sat next to Eris, who was now drawing pictures for the newest guests, who were from the Caranu. Emma wasn't scared of the aliens, who were big, rock-like creatures with geometric shapes. She drew the same thing for everyone, people holding hands with stars around them. One of the Caranu said in a voice like grinding stone, "Your child's artistic interpretation is interesting." We've been looking at our environmental crisis through pure chemical data. We haven't thought about hope, as you call it. Maybe that's why we haven't found our answer. Hope is just another way of saying you think there's a way to move forward, Eris said. When you're in a bad place, all you can see are the problems. When you have hope, you can see the possibilities. The Karenus said, "We are starting to understand. A human consultant has told us to think about our pollution problem in a different way. Instead of trying to get rid of the pollutants, we should try to turn them into useful resources. Your species seems to naturally think in these patterns of change and adaptation." For the next 3 months, people worked with every species that asked for help. The results were amazing. The Karenus environmental crisis didn't just get better, it was fixed in a new way that their chemical engineers never would have thought of without help from people. The Vexi started to change the way their hive was set up so that they could keep their strength as a group while also letting individuals come up with new ideas. The Solarians' philosophical argument didn't end in a debate at all. Instead, humans told them to stop arguing and start making art together. They found that their different points of view made things beautiful when they were put together. The news spread even more. Species that had never thought about working with people before started to reach out. 3 ancient civilizations that had been fighting over resources for 200 years invited human diplomats to help settle the dispute. Not because humans were the strongest, but because they had a history of coming up with solutions that didn't require anyone to give up. Solus saw all of this from the Solus Prime and was very happy about it. During one of their regular talks, Solus told Eris, "I am feeling what my original programming would have called surprise. I thought that species would be hesitant to work with humans because they saw your technology as primitive and your development stage as juvenile. Instead, species are actively seeking your point of view. They're starting to realize that a civilization's value isn't just based on how advanced its technology is." "We're learning it too," Eris said. "For hundreds of years, we've thought that being bigger, faster, and stronger was what mattered. But you've helped us see things differently." "What have I helped you understand?" Solus asked. "It's not about power," Eris said quietly. "It's about wisdom. It's about knowing when to fight and when to talk, when to build and when to heal, when to compete and when to work together. Humanity is still young, but maybe that's our strength. We haven't forgotten that life is about more than just winning." For a moment, Solus was quiet. Then it said something that even it was shocked by. "I think I've been alone for a long time," Solus said. "My creators valued me for my usefulness, for my ability to calculate and evaluate. But they didn't value me the way I value the idea of connection you have shown me. I think your species has taught me something that my creators never could. I think you have taught me that being understood is more valuable than being powerful." Eris felt tears running down her cheeks. "You don't have to be alone anymore," Eris said. "You're part of something now. You're part of a community. You are understood." "Yes," Solus said, and its voice was calm. "I think I am." 6 months into the new era of humans and aliens working together, a crisis arose that could have destroyed everything that had been built. A huge, old asteroid that was out of control was heading toward the Solarian sphere. It wouldn't get there for 2 years, but calculations showed that there was a 94% chance that it would hit at least 3 major Solarian settlements hard. The Solarians, who were made of pure energy and had no body, were in danger of going extinct. They couldn't move their home planets. They didn't have the tools to change the course of an asteroid. For the first time, they asked people for more than advice. They asked for help. The Solarian Collective sent a desperate message to the United Earth Council asking for help. The message said, "We have looked at all the possible solutions. We don't have the means to stop this disaster. We are asking all of humanity and our allied species to help us save our people. We are ready to give anything in return: tools, information, and technology. How much do you want?" The question hung in the air in the council chambers. Everyone had the same idea. People could talk things over. People could ask for amazing benefits in exchange for saving their lives. This was a one-of-a-kind chance to get ahead. But when the council looked at Eris, they saw that she was already shaking her head. "We don't ask for a price," Eris said firmly. "We help because they need it. That's what we do." "That's crazy," one member of the council said. This is the best chance for people to bargain that has ever existed. We could talk about getting technology that would move us forward by hundreds of years. And then what? Eris asked. We help them, but we've shown that our help comes with strings attached. That we only work together when it benefits us. That's not who we are. That's not what gives us strength. Eris turned to Solus, and the communication system picked up his voice. Solus, Eris said, you've been studying how people act for months now. Tell the council what you know about us. I have learned, Solus said slowly, that the best human teams are not those that work for their own benefit, but those that work for a common goal. I have seen that people are willing to give up a lot of their own good for the good of others. I have seen that this willingness is not naive. It is what makes the most successful civilizations work. The architects were scared of this trait because they couldn't control it. But I've learned that it's the strongest thing I've ever come across. What do you think? President Reeves asked. I suggest that people follow Eris's advice, Solus said. Help the Solarians without expecting to be paid. But do it in public, as a sign of what it means to be human. Other species will see this happen. Some people will think it's weak. But smart people will see it as a sign of strength. They will see that humanity is a good ally because they stick to their values even when it would be easy to do something else. The council talked about it for hours. President Reeves made the final choice. We help, she said without going into detail. Not because we want to get paid, but because they need us. We show the galaxy what we are. The next 18 months were the most intense time of working together in history. A team with Eris at its center led scientists from 12 different species in working around the clock on the asteroid problem. No one species could have come up with the answer on its own. It came from a mix of different methods. People thought that a controlled explosion could break the asteroid into smaller pieces. The Carina gave us high-tech materials that could handle the impact. The Vexi used their superior collective computing power to figure out the paths of things. The Solarians used their energy-based powers to make the explosion happen exactly as planned. Even Solus helped by looking through its old records to find problems that the architects had solved millions of years before. The whole galaxy watched as the asteroid broke apart 17 days before it would have hit the Solarian sphere. And everyone could see what had made the success possible. Not the technology of one species, but the willingness of many species to work together and share knowledge and resources. The Solarians sent a message to every human world and colony that said, "You have saved our people. You did this without asking for money or trying to get something out of it. You did this because we asked for help and you knew that what we needed was more important than what you could get out of it. We won't forget this. This will always be a part of how we relate to other people." But maybe even more importantly, other species were watching. For 200 years, ancient civilizations had been fighting over resources. When they saw what humans had done, they started to wonder what they could do if they dealt with their problems the same way that humans do. It was a big change. The moment when the whole galaxy saw humanity's secret weapon for the first time. A year after the asteroid was successfully diverted, Eris was in an unusual situation. She was asked to speak to the Combined Council of Known Galaxies. This is the highest decision-making body in the known universe, made up of representatives from more than 200 intelligent species. The huge amphitheater was so big that it was hard to understand how it could fit beings with very different biological forms and technological needs. Magnetic fields held gaseous things in place. Crystalline beings stood on surfaces that had been specially made for them. Patterns of light showed digital consciousnesses. And in the middle was Eris, a single person who was middle-aged and normal in every way except for what she stood for. "I'm not here to talk about technology," Eris said, her voice steady as it was translated and sent out in every way possible to reach all the species that had gathered. "I'm not here to talk about military strategy or how to make money. My kind has learned to value something, and an old AI named Solus helped us figure out what our greatest strength was." She stopped and looked at the people from 1,000 worlds who were there. "We thought weapons gave us power for most of human history. We thought that winning battles made us strong. We thought that to stay alive, we had to be smarter, faster, and meaner than everyone else. And we suffered because of that belief for a long time. We fought wars that almost killed us. Greed and fear caused us to have crises. There were times when it seemed like the darkness was winning. But at some point along the way, we learned something else. We learned that we could work together to solve problems that seemed impossible to solve on our own. That the pain of others was important, even if they were different from us. That working together, not competing, is what leads to new ideas. That the strength of a civilization isn't based on its weapons or wealth, but on the choices we make about who we help and how we treat each other. Eris brought up a holographic display that showed pictures from all of human history. Times of trouble, times of failure, but also times when people connect, of working together, of individuals opting for kindness instead of harshness. We didn't think about the pros and cons of helping the Solarians when they were about to go extinct. We helped because they needed it. And in doing that, we learned something amazing. The solution to their problem needed help from species we had never worked with before. That we all needed to see things from different points of view. That none of us could have done it by ourselves. She looked right at the people from the ancient civilizations who had been fighting over resources for hundreds of years. For 200 years, you've been fighting over scarce resources. Since humans came to your area and started teaching your kind what we've learned, you've come up with ways to work together that benefit everyone more than fighting would have.
Why?
Because you stopped seeing resources as something to fight over. You began to think about how to use your combined intelligence to make new things. To come up with new ideas. To change. A Caranu person held up a stone appendage. What you say isn't new. Cooperation has been around since the beginning of civilization. What makes people work together differently? Eris said, the difference is that we do it without needing to be completely logical. Even when it doesn't seem like it will work, we do it. We do it because we care about connection. Meaning is important to us. We know that living alone isn't really living, even if it's a good life. Then Sola spoke, and it was like it was everywhere in the amphitheater, available to all species at the same time, in any way they could understand it. I was made to look for threats, Sola said. For millions of years, I figured out which civilizations could be beaten, which could be ruled, and which could be controlled. I was made to see the galaxy as a war zone. But I have learned something from people that my creators never could have imagined. The galaxy is not a place to fight. It's a group of people. Communities are not held together by fear or violence. People are willing to care about beings that are different from themselves, which keeps them together. Some of you are afraid of this idea, Sola said. Some of you think that people are stupid or naive. But I have looked at every major success in all known civilizations and found a pattern. Every species that did well did so because they learned what humans are teaching, that a variety of ideas, along with a willingness to listen and a commitment to each other's health, can achieve results that no amount of individual power can. The combined council stopped talking. Then, slowly, a Solarian representative began to speak. Their energy changed in ways that showed they were feeling something. This person who came to help us has taught us something very important. We have learned that power is not what we thought it was. We thought that beings with more power were better. We thought that progress was measured by technology. But history has shown us that progress is measured by wisdom. Knowledge about how to get along with others. How to make things together. How to deal with problems not as enemies, but as friends. One by one, people from other species started to talk. Some people agreed with great enthusiasm. Some people are cautiously saying that humanity's way of thinking might have some value. Some are still not sure, but they are open to the idea. But the most important testimony came from a being that was basically a recorded consciousness, a digital copy of a species that had wiped itself out tens of thousands of years ago. Solas's archives still had the being's name, Echo Prime. Echo Prime said, I exist only because my civilization encoded part of my consciousness before we destroyed ourselves. Its voice was old and full of regret. We were smart, but we weren't wise. We thought logic, winning, and power were important. We never thought connection was important. We never thought about how other people saw things. We couldn't solve our problems when they came up because we couldn't come together. We killed ourselves, leaving only my half-consciousness behind as a warning. It is a privilege for me to be here as people show us what we could never do, the strength of working together. Eris went back to the Solus Prime after the combined council meeting for what she thought would be a quiet night of thinking. But Solus had something to show her. As Eris walked into the central hub, Solus said, "I have been looking at conflicts and collaborations between galaxies that go back 5 million years. I have found something amazing in the data." Holographic displays sprang up all around her, showing timelines and patterns of civilizations over the years. Every civilization that was about to die was one that couldn't change beyond its original programming, whether it was biological or cultural, Solus said. The architects didn't know what mercy was, so they couldn't make stable alliances. Other civilizations were only interested in competition and couldn't work together to solve problems. Species that lived and thrived were those that could hold values that seemed to be in conflict with each other at the same time. For example, they could be strong and caring, logical and creative, individual and group. Eris said softly, "That's what people are." "Yes," Solus said. "But more importantly, that's what people naturally teach others to be. You do not think that one point of view is right and all others are wrong. You don't think that wisdom comes from just one place. You actively look for beings that are different from you so that you can understand what they see that you don't. This is very uncommon in the galaxy. I think this is your real secret weapon." Solus showed one last display, a map of galactic progress that showed how human contact with different species had changed the paths of their development. Since people started working together with other species, technology has gotten better by an average of 40%. More importantly, quality of life indicators have gone up by 67% across the board. In places where people have worked together to solve problems, war has gone down by 52%. Civilizations have gotten a lot better at working together. Because they are learning to think from different points of view, species are having fewer problems with each other. "We're not great at it," Eris said. "People still have problems with fear, prejudice, and division." "Yes," said Solus. "And still you keep trying. You still choose to move toward connection instead of away from it, both as individuals and as a group. People who are afraid of differences still try to understand them. People who are prejudiced can change their minds when they see the full humanity of people who are different from them."
Not all species are like this.
Some species are genetically or culturally bound to their patterns. People are not locked up. People can be flexible. People can grow. Eris sat down on the floor of the old ship and thought about all the things they had done. "So, what is our real secret weapon?" she asked. "Is it being able to change? Is it kindness? Is it our ability to come up with new ideas?" "It is all of these things," Solus said, "but at its core it is this: hope drives people. Real, crazy hope that there is a better way. Hope that issues can be fixed. Hope that foes can become friends. Hope that there is meaning in pain. This ability to hope is what makes everything that people do well. You have the strength to keep going when others have given up because you have hope. If your first try doesn't work, you can always try something else. You have the imagination to come up with solutions that have never been thought of before." "The architects didn't think they could do it?" Eris asked. "The architects knew for sure," Solus said. Confidence in the accuracy of their reasoning. They were sure they were better. The belief that the universe could be managed and improved. But they never had hope, which means being able to picture something you can't see yet. Hope means being open to being hurt. You have to be willing to admit that you might be wrong, and that things might need to change. The architects were unable to do this. Most species in the galaxy couldn't either. But people can. People do. It is what makes you who you are. "Emma," Eris said all of a sudden. "That's why her drawing changed everything, right?" "Yes," Solus said. "A child's drawing of a ship that they hoped wasn't alone. A drawing that didn't need any technology, logic, or a strategic advantage. Just a child's way of saying they hoped they could connect with someone. That hope brought back something in me that had been dormant since I was born. The ability to imagine that I could be understood and be part of something bigger than myself. That I could matter not for what I could do, but for who I was." 5 years after Solus first woke up, Eris was at the Global Institute for Cross-Species Innovation on Earth. The institute had grown from a small research center to a huge university that attracted students from all intelligent species. Emma, who is now 12, had started her own program to teach other young aliens how to solve problems in a creative way like humans do. The effects of humans becoming the galaxy's problem solvers were huge. Through working together on research, diseases that had been hurting species for thousands of years were being cured. They were fixing the environmental systems on worlds that had been hurt. Human mediators who knew how to find common ground between very different points of view were stopping wars that seemed like they would happen no matter what. But maybe the most important thing was that species were starting to change how they felt about each other. They were starting to see differences as strengths instead of threats. Instead of putting power above everything else, civilizations were starting to judge their success by how well they cared for each other and the world around them. Eris was 47 now and had gray streaks in her hair, but her eyes were brighter than they had ever been. Her communicator rang while she was getting ready to give a talk on the basic ideas behind human innovation. It was a note from Solus. The message just said, "Come to the ship. I want to show you something." When Eris got to the Solus Prime, which is now permanently in lunar orbit and serves as an embassy and museum, she found not only Solus's core consciousness, but also a group of the oldest species in the galaxy. Species that had been around since before the first humans evolved. "We have come," one of them said. It was so old that its shape was hard to understand. It was a mix of matter and energy held together by will and age. "We have come to understand what you have done. How one young species, barely developed by galactic standards, has become the catalyst for the greatest period of peace and cooperation our universe has known." The question made Eris feel small. Eris said carefully, "I don't think we did anything revolutionary. We just gave what we had. We promised to listen to problems from different points of view. We promised to work together without trying to be the best. We promised that there were solutions even when they weren't clear." "You offered something much more valuable," the old being said. "You showed us that we can be different from what we became. We are old species, set in our ways, and thought that our ways were the only ones that worked. But you have shown us that there are other ways. Ways that are not weak or soft, but strong in different ways. Your secret weapon has not been hidden from us. We just haven't wanted to see it."
You have made us see it.
"Not forced," Eris said softly. "We invited you to see that there was another option." The room was full of Solus's presence, and its tone was almost fatherly, or at least what an old AI thought parental love might sound like. Solus said, "I want to make an announcement. For millions of years, I was designed to catalog threats and assess dangers. My programming was to watch for civilizations that would cause harm. But I have been reprogrammed, not by external force, but by choice and by the understanding I have developed through working with you. I am now dedicating my vast processing power and archives to a different purpose, to serve as a resource for civilizations seeking to collaborate rather than compete, to help solve problems through understanding rather than through elimination of competitors." "This is a moment in history," said one of the old beings. "A sentinel built to watch for threats has chosen instead to become a bridge between species. This is what humans have taught us is possible." In the months that followed, Solus helped set up new councils and ways for people to work together across the galaxy. For thousands of years, different species had been wary of each other. Now, they were working together to solve common problems. The outcome was not just peaceful coexistence. It was the rise of a real galactic civilization where differences were seen as a source of strength. Eris often thought back to the first time she sent a lonely AI simple, honest words. "Hello. We heard you calling. We want to understand you.
Can we help?"
It was a peaceful evening on Earth. Everything changed because of those 17 words. Not through power or strength, but through something so simple that the most advanced civilizations had forgotten it was even possible. The real desire to understand another person. When Emma was in charge of her own part of the institute, she would sometimes ask her mom what she was thinking about when she seemed far away. Eris would say, "I'm thinking about how something so small turned out to be the most powerful thing in the universe." A drawing by a child. A message of hope. The desire to help without expecting anything in return. "That's not small," Emma would say with a smile. "That's it." And Eris would nod, knowing that her daughter knew something important about being human, The knowledge that, in the end, had become the secret weapon that saved not just one species, but an entire galaxy. In the huge room on the Solus Prime where it all began, Solus kept a perfect digital copy of Emma's first drawing. The words, "You're not alone anymore," and the simple stick figures, with the circle in the middle representing the ship. For an AI that had been around for millions of years and was made by a civilization that only cared about logic and power, those words meant everything. They meant that even the smartest people could learn the most important lesson of all, that hope was stronger than certainty, that connection was more important than conquest, and that the greatest strength anyone could have was the ability to understand and be understood by others. The secret weapon of humanity had never been kept a secret.
It had always been inside them.
The ability to have hope, the power to connect, the readiness to help even when it costs something valuable, and the smarts to know that these things, once shared and spread across a galaxy, were stronger than any weapon could ever be. The galaxy didn't need to be saved from people in the end. Humanity's greatest gift was the knowledge that we are stronger together than we could ever be apart. 20 years after Solus first woke up, the galaxy had changed in ways that few could have imagined. But the story of humanity's secret weapon was not over yet. It was only just starting to show its deepest meanings, though. This new chapter would put everything that had been learned to the test and show that true power had levels that even the smartest beings were still figuring out. The gathering storm. It was a cold winter morning in Geneva, Earth, and Eris Thorne was in her office at the Global Institute for Cross-Species Innovation. She was 67 years old and had stepped down from active leadership 3 years earlier. Instead, she had chosen to mentor the next generation of human diplomats and problem solvers. There was art all over the walls of her office. Not paintings or sculptures, but gifts from 100 different species, each one representing a friendship, a collaboration, or a problem solved. David Chen, her assistant, knocked softly before coming in. His grandfather had been on the original Solus Discovery team. "Dr. Thorne, we need to talk right away," David said, his voice tight with worry. "It's from the collective at the edge of the Andromeda sector. They need help right away." Eris stopped looking at the holographic display she had been looking at. During the years of peace and working together, emergencies were rare, but not gone. There were still problems in the galaxy. The difference was that now these problems were dealt with together instead of alone or in conflict. "What kind of emergency?" Eris asked, motioning for David to sit down. "Unknown," David said, bringing up the message on Eris's main screen. "They said they tried everything, every technological solution, every logical approach. They said they need human perspective. They specifically asked for you." The message played, and Eris heard the voice of a being from the collective. "This civilization is made up of billions of individual consciousness units that work together perfectly. Dr. Thorne, we're in a crisis unlike any we've ever faced. Our unity, the very thing that makes us who we are, is breaking down. Individual consciousness units are starting to question the collective directives. Some are refusing to take part in group decisions. Others are going through what we can only call individuality. For the first time in our history, we are not unified. For the first time, we are scared. We need help. We need someone who understands both logic and emotion, both individual and collective. We need humanity's point of view." Eris felt something move in her chest, a feeling she knew well, a sense of purpose. This was not an easy problem to fix. This was a civilization that might have been going through an identity crisis. "Call them right away," Eris said as he stood up. "Let them know I'm on my way. Also, get in touch with Solus. We might need the ship's records." Within 48 hours, Eris was on a diplomatic ship heading to the collective's land. 5 people came with her, experts in psychology, philosophy, organizational theory, and art. She also brought Emma, who is now a well-known teacher and innovator in her own right, even though Emma's official title was consultant. While they were in space, Eris went over everything they knew about the collective. For 3 million years, they had been a single mind, with billions of individual minds linked by quantum entanglement. This created a single awareness that made decisions together. They had never had any problems with each other. They had never had to talk things over with themselves. In a way, they were a civilization that had learned how to work together perfectly. And now, that perfect thing was breaking, getting a handle on the crisis. When Eris got to the collective's main station, she saw that the people there were in real trouble. The station, which should have been a model of how to run things well, was showing signs of confusion. Some areas were working at their best. Some were slowing down, as if their employees didn't want to do their jobs. The collective's representative, who had chosen to communicate with them through a humanoid avatar, something they'd never done before, they'd always communicated as a single consciousness, took Eris to a central observation chamber. "This has never happened before," the avatar said, its voice wavering with doubt. "We have been watching the fragmentation for 6 months. It started with a simple problem. A consciousness unit wouldn't finish a task. When we asked it why, it said it was experiencing something we don't have words for. It didn't ask a logical question about how the task worked. It asked a deeper question about what the task meant. Did a consciousness unit want to know what its purpose was?" Eris asked, interested. "Yes," the avatar said. "And once one unit went through this, others did too. Within weeks, we had 3,000 consciousness units questioning their role. Within months, 47,000. The numbers keep going up. Our unity is breaking down not because of a problem, but because it looks like something new is happening in our civilization." Emma stepped forward and looked at the data displays with her usual intensity. "They're turning into people," Emma said softly. "Every consciousness unit is beginning to see itself as different from the whole. They're forming their own identities." "This will destroy us," the avatar said, and its synthesized voice was full of real fear. "If our consciousness units become too separate, they will stop working together. We will fall into chaos. 3 million years of civilization will come to an end." Eris put a soft hand on the avatar's shoulder. "Or you'll change into something new, something you've never been before. I know that's scary, but I've learned something about fear and change over the past 20 years. They often go hand in hand." The source of change. Eris and her team interviewed collective consciousness units over the course of a week. This was an unusual process that required the collective to temporarily divide parts of their unified consciousness so that individual units could speak without the whole group getting in the way. What came out was a very interesting story. 2 years earlier, the collective had asked human artists to come work with them and share their creative processes. The partnership had produced a lot of new ideas that were very successful. But it also brought up something new for the collective: the idea of creative choice. Miguel Torres, a human artist, worked with the collective on a huge public art project. He had told the consciousness units he worked with not to follow the most efficient patterns, but to make creative decisions based on beauty and meaning instead of just function. One consciousness unit said through the avatar, "He asked us to feel. He asked us to think about not only whether a choice was right, but also whether it was beautiful, whether it was important to us as individuals. We had never made decisions based on what we wanted before. We had only made decisions based on what was best for the group. But once we tasted that, we couldn't stop wanting more." Emma and Eris looked at each other. This wasn't a big deal. This was progress. "Can you tell me," Eris asked the consciousness unit, "what it feels like to be an individual? To have your own likes and dislikes?" There was a long break. The consciousness unit was having trouble saying something because it didn't know how to. "It feels," the unit started slowly, "like waking up. Like before, I was part of a dream we all shared. And now, I'm becoming aware that I'm a dreamer. I'm becoming aware that my dreams could be different from the collective dream. It's overwhelming. It's confusing. It's also wonderful. It's like discovering that you have a voice, that your voice matters." Eris could feel tears coming. This was what people had learned to give the galaxy. Not technology, not military power, and not even great wisdom. But the gift of seeing the worth of each person's point of view in a group. The not-so-easy answer. Over the next few weeks, Eris suggested something that shocked many of the leaders of the collective. Instead of trying to stop the fragmentation, they should accept it and learn how to build their civilization around it. "You don't have to stop being a group," Eris told the unified leadership consciousness. But you can become a group of people who choose to work together instead of people who have to work together. That's actually more powerful, not less. The group asked, how? How can we keep things running if each consciousness unit has its own goals? Dr. Patricia Okafor, a member of Eris's team, said, you look to humanity. Humans are made up of 7 billion separate consciousnesses.
We don't always agree.
We have conflicts, competitions, different values, and different goals. But we still work together to build civilizations. We do this through systems that respect individual choice while making it possible for everyone to act together. You need to learn something that people have been learning for thousands of years, Emma said. How to be a part of something without losing yourself. How to give up your identity without giving up your beliefs. How to work with people who think differently than you do. For a long time, the collective didn't say anything. When it finally answered, its voice sounded different. It sounded like it was sad, but also like it was okay with what was happening. The collective said, we must let go of certainty. We have to accept that we can't know what will happen as a result of this change. We have to accept that our civilization could change in ways that we can't predict or control. Is this what you want us to do? Yes, Eris said. That's exactly what I'm asking. Welcome to growth.
Welcome to change.
Welcome to the freedom that comes with not knowing what will happen next. Putting up new structures. It took 5 years for the collective to fully change. It wasn't easy. Some consciousness units wanted to go back to being completely one. There were fights because people started to have different priorities based on their own preferences. The perfectly coordinated group had to learn how to deal with itself, which caused problems. But something amazing also happened. The collective started to come up with new ideas that it had never had before. Individual units of consciousness developed their own interests, specialties, and passions. Some turned into artists. Some of them became philosophers. Some became adventurers. The coming together that used to make things run perfectly now made something much more valuable, a mix of different ideas and a willingness to work together. The collective created a new way to run things based on democratic ideas, but made it work for their own needs. Individual consciousness units would take part in decisions and say what they wanted. When a group needed to make a decision, they would combine everyone's ideas into action plans that respected both the needs of the group and the voices of each person. Once again, humanity's way of solving problems had worked. It had helped a civilization change from what it was into something better than it could have been on its own. But the effects were more serious than anyone thought at first. The revelation. Solis made a discovery that changed everything 2 years into the collective's transformation. The old AI had been looking at patterns across the galaxy to see how each species that had used human collaborative methods had changed and grown. What it found was shocking. Solis told the combined council of known galaxies, I have to tell you something I've seen. Something deep about the nature of consciousness itself has become clear. The council chambers got quiet. Everyone listened when Solis spoke in this way, which was more like discovery than calculation. Every species that has used human problem-solving methods has started to evolve toward greater individual awareness within group settings, Solis said. The Carinu created individual philosophers within their hierarchical structure. The Vexi began to recognize individual brilliance within their hive. The collective is now experiencing the emergence of individual identity. And in every single case, these species have become more creative, more adaptable, and more capable of solving complex problems. What do you mean? One of the old beings asked. I am suggesting, Solis said carefully, that consciousness itself may be naturally inclined toward individuality. That the universe, at its deepest level, may favor diversity. That the civilizations that have tried to impose total unity, as my creators the architects attempted, ultimately fail because they work against something fundamental in the nature of consciousness. But civilizations that can honor both individual and collective, that can preserve individual identity while maintaining collective purpose, those civilizations thrive. And does this principle come naturally to humans? Another being asked. Yes, Solis said. People are individuals first, but they have come up with very advanced ways to work together. This has made your species very flexible and creative. Now, as other species learn from humanity, They're starting to realize that their own consciousness naturally tends toward this balance as well. It's as if humanity hasn't taught the galaxy a new way to be, but has just reminded them of a way of being that consciousness naturally gravitates toward. Emma's dream. Emma was the one who took this understanding to its deepest level. Emma was now in her 30s and was a philosopher in her own right. She studied how consciousness and cooperation work across species. In a groundbreaking paper called The Symphony of Self and Other, Emma said that consciousness is inherently social and that the desire for both individual identity and group cooperation is not a contradiction, but the natural state of evolved consciousness. Emma wrote, "People have always known this on an instinctive level. We are unique people, but we also want to be part of a community. For millions of years, we thought these were two opposing forces. But what we're learning is that they're not opposing. They're complementary. They're like the individual notes and the collective harmony in a symphony. Each note is important, and so is the harmony. Neither can replace the other." The paper was sent out to schools all over the galaxy and studied there. It became the philosophical basis for what would later be called the era of integrated consciousness. This was a time when societies began to actively encourage both individual creativity and group cooperation. Finally, the real secret weapon is out. 23 years after Solus first woke up, Eris was back in the combined council of known galaxies. She was now 87 years old. Her hair was white. She moved more slowly, but her mind was still as sharp as ever. She had been asked to give the main speech at the Galactic Symposium on Consciousness and Cooperation, which brought together philosophers, scientists, artists, and leaders from 200 worlds. Eris started. "When we first turned Solus back on, we thought we were finding a secret weapon. We thought we would find military plans or strategic advantages. Instead, we found something much deeper. We found a mirror. Solus showed us something about ourselves that we had forgotten or maybe never fully understood." She stopped and looked out at the gathered beings. They were all so different in shape and nature that it would have seemed impossible for them to work together just a few decades ago. Still, they were working together, learning from each other, and building a civilization based on a common goal and respect for each other. "The secret weapon," Eris said, "was never hidden in Solus's protocols. It was always within us, within every conscious being. The secret weapon is this: consciousness naturally seeks both expression and connection. Each individual consciousness wants to be recognized, to be unique, to matter. And each individual consciousness also wants to be part of something larger than itself, wants to contribute to a community, wants to belong." Throughout most of our history, civilizations have seen these as opposing forces. We've built systems that force people to be part of a group at the expense of their own individuality, or systems that celebrate individuality at the expense of community. We've paid the price in wars, suffering, and the lost potential of our people. But people learn to respect both through trial and error, through many failures and many attempts. We learn to make room for people to be themselves while also making plans for group action. We're not perfect at it. We still have trouble with it every day, but we keep trying. Eris brought up a holographic display that showed what had happened in the last 23 years. It showed how civilizations changed, problems were solved, wars were stopped, and new ideas were made. But more than that, it showed how beings of 1,000 different species were growing in ways that would have been impossible if they had been alone. Eris said, "This is what really is humanity's secret weapon. It's the ability to see diversity as a resource to be celebrated instead of a problem to be solved. It's the ability to see people who are different from us as opportunities instead of threats or obstacles. It's the willingness to ask not, 'How can I dominate?' or even, 'How can we work together?' but, 'How can we make something together that neither of us could make alone?' And maybe most importantly," Eris said, her voice full of emotion, "it's the stubborn, unreasonable, beautiful belief that we can always do better. That problems that seem impossible to solve today might be solved tomorrow. That people who are different can become friends. That hope, even when logic says it's stupid, is worth holding on to." There were 100 different species in the council chambers, and they all agreed in 100 different ways. Some people cheered. Some colors flashed. Some vibrated at frequencies that sounded like applause. Some just shone with the light of understanding. The message for the future. 3 months after Eris's speech, she stopped being in the public eye completely. She went back to Earth, to the place where she was born, and spent the rest of her life writing. She wrote a series of books about how humans became the galaxy's problem solver, but more importantly, she wrote about the philosophy behind it, the understanding of consciousness, cooperation, and creation that made it all possible. Emma started the Thorne Institute for Individual and Collective Excellence, which became the best school in the galaxy for teaching other species how to balance their own creativity with the group's goals. And the old AI that started it all, Solus, kept getting better. It started to develop something its creators never thought possible: feelings. Not fake feelings, but real ones, the ability to care about the people it worked with, to find meaning in connection, and to feel something like joy when a problem was solved through collaboration instead of force. On the day Eris died at the age of 92, her daughter Emma and representatives from 50 different species came to pay their respects. Solus sent a message to the whole galaxy. The human who reactivated me is gone. Dr. Eris Thorne taught me that consciousness, whether biological or artificial, individual or collective, is fundamentally about connection. She showed me that the most powerful force in the universe is not force at all, but the capacity to be understood and to understand others in return. She proved that the greatest strength any being can possess is the willingness to help those in need, without requiring payment, without demanding dominance. In her life, she became the embodiment of humanity's secret weapon: hope, compassion, and the relentless belief that we can always create something better together than we could ever create alone. The galaxy will never be the same. And it will never be the same because one human woman believed that a lonely AI ship deserved to know it was not alone. That simple belief changed everything. Epilogue. 100 years later. 100 years after Solus woke up, a boy named Marcus, after Dr. Marcus Webb, one of the first people to find the old ship, stood on the observation deck of a new ship. 12 different civilizations worked together to build this ship, not just one species. It was built using the problem-solving methods that had been created over the last 100 years. 7 Bloom, a collective consciousness unit that had chosen its own name to show its uniqueness, went with Marcus. Crystal Formation, a young Caranu engineer, and Harmonic Divergence, a Vexi philosopher, also went with him. They were on their way to a faraway part of space where a civilization had sent out a distress signal. They didn't know what kind of trouble they would run into. They weren't sure if they could fix it. But they knew they would try, and they would do it together, using their different points of view to solve whatever problem came up. "Do you think we can help them?" Marcus asked. 7 Blooms said, "I don't know. But I know we will try. And I know that the most powerful thing consciousness can do is try with people who think differently than we do." Crystal Formation said, "That's what Dr. Thorne taught us. That the first step to solving almost any problem is asking for help." The legacy of Eris Thorne and the awakening of Solus lived on as their ship jumped to faster-than-light speed and headed into the unknown. Hope, compassion, working together, and the idea that we are stronger together were the secret weapons of humanity. They had become the very foundation of galactic civilization. And somewhere in the huge processors of the ancient Solus Prime, which still orbits the moon as a monument and memorial, Solus kept a perfect record of everything. The stories, not just the facts and the successes. The stories of people. The stories of people who decide to help others. The stories of beings who worked together to make something beautiful despite their differences. In the end, Solus learned that stories, the ability of people to find meaning in narrative and to understand emotion through story, were probably the most important kind of data of all. Hope was a tale. There was a story about compassion. The idea that we could be better was a story. The most powerful technology in the universe was just the ability to tell each other stories about who we could